Hello and welcome once again to the Random Wrestling Review, our local to global series, which is still going strong now in February 2001. Of course, in our last show, we brought you Fighting Spirit 4, which ended in chaos when Dave Batista went to a double count out with Jim the Anvil Neidhart. And after the match, Chris Harris joined in an attack on Batista with Jim Neidhart until James Storm made the save. That is James Storm, who we were told at the beginning of the show we would not see again by Bruce Hart, who had, of course, the previous show to that in Power Surge, finally given James Storm notice that his 30 days were about to take place in terms of his notice period. So James Storm, as things stand, 15 days away from his release. Well, our next show is going to be Mega Slam, which we put the name in for last time, and I couldn't come up with anything better. So apologies for that, because it's an absolutely atrocious name for a show. It came into my head because it's something I used to use when I was a kid and I was playing my wrestling figures, doing exactly what I'm doing here, only in a more physical and less kind of recordable way, I guess. So things have not changed however many years ago into my life. Whatever the case, we're going to continue with our booking of this company. We've got Mega Slam in 13 days, just before the end of James Storm's contract. Of course, Jim Neidhart has big morale issues. That's because of some recent booking that we did. I think actually that is the one um, from Fighting Spirit. So the one we just did the draw with Batista, he wasn't happy about doing that. Whatever the case, let's hope he sticks around, because the main event of our next show is set to be um, Jim Neidhart and Chris Harris against James Storm and Dave Batista, as you might imagine. That's going to be our main event of our second show in February. And then after that, of course, we've got the Golden Triangle Tournament back following its inaugural running last March, where, of course, the winner was Charlie Haas. Charlie Haas won't be able to compete in this year's tournament because he is out with an injury, but that is coming up, and I'm looking forward to bringing you that, because it feels like that's going to be a bit of a I don't know what the word is, but almost like a new season again, or a reset for the company in some ways, because obviously we are at now the point where the James Storm versus Bruce Hart story is coming to an end. And I imagine, or I mean, I don't know, but I wonder whether or not people have been watching this thinking, how am I going to get out of James Storm and leaving the company here when he's obviously been put on notice by Bruce Hart? And the truth is, I'm not going to stop him from leaving the company. We are going to voluntarily release James Storm from his contract. Now, that might seem crazy to some people. James Storm has been, without a doubt, one of the best performers in the company, one of the best, most consistent wrestlers we've had for very many years. He's now, in terms of matches, had 57 matches. It'll end with 58 matches, one of the highest or the leading appearance makers for the Random Wrestling Review. But it just felt like the right thing to do as part of the story. Hang on, let's have a look at this then. Pay rise request from James Storm. You know what? Oh, no, he's withdrawn the pay rise request. Interesting. I was going to just give it to him. Jim Neidhart has returned. That's because I gave him a week off to sort of basically hope he would stick around for a bit longer. We've still got a couple of days until Mega Slam. Just interested financially. So 1,936. I do think we're going to lose some money this month. But anyway, let's move on. Yeah, we are going to let James Storm go, and I just think the reason is not because I haven't got anything that I can't think of anything to do with him, but I just felt like from a story perspective, it was the right thing to do. There really was nowhere for me to go, and a little bit of a kind of insight into the way I book this stuff. So don't I don't really plan very far ahead at this point in time. Let me before we go any further, let's just have a look at this news story here. WWF took the decision to send Al Snow to surgery to address an open fibular fracture. Unfortunately, complications are said to have arisen, and the operation as a whole has been deemed a failure. And Al Snow now faces a longer recovery time. So I wonder how long he's out for. Do we know? Does it say? No, it doesn't say how long he's going to be out for. Whatever the case, he's out injured for some time. I mean, it's not a major piece of news in terms of the world, I suppose, that we've got here. But anyway, we are on the Mega Slam tonight. before I start to book this one, let me just explain why the James Storm thing is happening. I was going into it just then, and apologies, this might be visually a little bit dull for you, but I'm hoping that what I'm saying might be of interest anyway. And that is that basically, when the James Storm story happened, I mean, you think back to it as well, actually, let's go all the way back into the history books here of this company. This story began all the way back, I think, in 1998. Was it here? Kid Chaos defeated James Storm in a loser leaves random wrestling review match. Now, originally, this was just the Kid Chaos James Storm feud was just a placeholder for these two. I had nothing more really to do with them. Was that the first match between the two? I think it was here that it was at this one. James Storm went to a time limit draw with Kid Chaos, and James Storm was obviously going in as the main, as the sort of as the favorite here. I mean, look at how far back it is. Dave Batista defeated Roddy Piper in the main event. That's how long ago it was. But the idea was that I just was like, well, I need James Storm to be doing something for a couple of months. So that's where it basically started. And we went from that to James Storm not being able to beat Kid Chaos. And so them having this match where James Storm challenged Kid Chaos to another match and said that if he loses, he would leave the random wrestling review, and he did indeed lose. Now, when I had him lose, I didn't have any plans in place for what would happen next. It's possible that after, like very quickly after that, I thought actually what we'll do is we'll bring him back under a mask. In fact, I think by the time I decided for him to lose this, I did have a plan for him coming back under a mask. But in general, I didn't have a plan for him even to leave when the or even to have this match when the story began. So when he came back under a mask, which I think was an Attitude Adjustment, is the shadow here? Yeah, and defeated Charlie Haas. I had no idea what we were going to do with the mask. I had no idea. I didn't know that it would lead to him becoming the RWR Northwest champion, as it did. All the way down, was it the Matrix somewhere around here? Oh, it was three-way forever. That's right, because the Matrix, the Shadow defeated Dave Batista by count out, and Bruce Hart announced the three-way match for the title between the Shadow, Dave Batista, and Ace Steel. And the Shadow beat Ace Steel to win the title. And the Shadow was then champion, and Batista took it upon himself to expose who the Shadow was. And that's when, at the end of '99, already kind of what we're talking here, as much as nearly 18 months into this story, really, the Shadow was exposed as being James Storm. And then at the party of the Millennium, that's right, that's when Bruce Hart revealed the punishment for Storm, which is a 5-point deduction in the rankings. Woman explained that James Storm had signed a sort of ironclad one-year contract in July, which meant he would go all the way around back to July of 2000. And when I had all of that happen, when I said that we had the contract up to July, I didn't know where this was headed. The story just kind of writes itself because I put myself in these situations within the story. And so I was like, well, I can't, as it became clear that James Storm wasn't going to get to the number of points he needed to win the RWR Northwest title, that's when I was like, okay, well, we can bring in Chris Harris. They can be a tag team. They can win the tag team titles and kind of tie Bruce Hart's hand. But when they won the tag titles, again, I had no clue of where I was going next with it or how this was going to resolve itself. And at that point, I figured, well, James Storm can't be given a multi-year deal just because he's a tag team champion. Surely Bruce Hart would, thinking logically, Bruce Hart would keep him in the company for some time, but to try and get the tag team titles off of him so that he could then kind of release the guy. So they signed him to the 30-day rolling contract, and then at that point, I still had no idea how the thing was going to resolve itself until we got to probably October, November time, and that's when I started to put the plans in place that we've seen unfold over the last few episodes. And I just got to the point where I was like, there is no way for me to keep James Storm and keep the logical flow of this story going. The story itself brings me to only one conclusion, and that is for James Storm to be finished up with the company. So at this show, I wanted him to go out with a bit of a kind of a bit of glory and a bit of a goodbye. So that's really what this show is going to be, effectively. Um, Nothing else. just to sort of say goodbye. But there is other things going on. We've got actually three pretty big tag team matches, and we start with the first one, which is going to see Mark Henry and Sean Stasiak taking on Teddy Hart and TJ Wilson. These two teams have been in a sort of feud for a little bit. Started out, of course, with the match where I think, yeah, I thought, oh no, it doesn't show it here, but I think the initial match was that Henry and Stasiak couldn't beat TJ Wilson and Teddy Hart in a significant amount of time. Well, this one, I'm going to work the crowd. The winner is going to be Teddy Hart, and the loser, I think we'll make it Sean Stasiak. We're going to have a flash pinfall finish. We'll keep Sean Stasiak strong, because I don't really want this to make it look like Teddy Hart and TJ Wilson were able to do this, all things being equal. But we're going to have some partner miscommunication finish from Mark Henry here, which is ultimately going to result in Stasiak being pinned by Teddy Hart in this opening contest. Then in the second match of the night, we're going to have Billy Kidman up against C.W. Anderson. Kidman not long ago lost a match to C.W. Anderson, I believe. Yeah, here it was, January. In fact, only about a month ago. So we're going to have them face one another in a kind of rematch. Obviously, C.W. Anderson won that match and became the number one contender, but then lost his title match to the champion, Chris Harris. And in this one, Billy Kidman's going to get his win back, basically. That was the only reason I did this one. Let's make it an all-out match. Create a bit of variety on the show. Let's have a look at the rankings, actually, whilst we're here. And you can see there's a load of people on it, because I've included Rocco Rock and Johnny Grunge in the rankings because they are not yet gone. Of course, they defeated Sean Stasiak and Mark Henry, a tag team match at our last show. And I'd still have plans to use them at least for a couple of months yet. So they're not going to be gone just yet anyway. You can see at the top, Chris Harris is champion, of course, but then we've got Rex King and Ace Steel on 11 points, Barry Buchanan and the still injured Charlie Haas on 10 points, Teddy Hart on 8, Chemo on 6, Eric Young on 4, Punk and Wayne on 3, Walker, Henry, James Storm and Sean Stasiak on 2. This being James Storm's last show, though, of course. Jim Neidhart, Rocco Rock, Johnny Grunge, and Dave Batista on 1, and then TJ Wilson, Billy Kidman, and C.W. Anderson on 0. This will be TJ Wilson's first victory in the company as well, which is not something I'd realised until now. So next we're going to have an angle where a woman is going to come out and ask for Bruce Hart to join her, and woman is going to appeal to give James Storm a new contract. Bruce Hart rejects the suggestion, and there's going to be no saving James Storm. He is going to be leaving. And the other thing about this story where the end is going to be that James Storm leaves is I just felt like there's no way out of it. There's no way to give James Storm a contract from Bruce Hart, who doesn't like him, doesn't want him around, and has been trying to get rid of him for a year. So we've let him go with kind of whilst we're on his way out. Sorry, his leaving has effectively led to a new champion in Chris Harris, and has putting Chris Harris over pretty big, and has led to kind of a new alliance between him, Chris Harris, sorry, and Jim Neidhart and Bruce Hart, who are kind of a group now in some ways. In fact, I think I've put them in as a stable as Hart Incorporated, with Bruce Hart, Chris Harris, and Jim Neidhart in it. So it's kind of kicked off those two things, but also I just felt like there aren't many occasions where I don't think ever, but certainly in professional wrestling of the last 25 years, where a company voluntarily gives up arguably their biggest star in pursuit of the right end to a story. And that's what we've got here. It kind of reminds me of, you remember in the summer of 2000 where you had Kurt Angle, Stephanie, and Triple H in the love triangle. And the logical step for the story would have been for Stephanie to effectively turn on Triple H and go with Kurt Angle. But in doing so, they would have arguably have made Triple H look a little bit of a chump. And they as a company kind of botched the end of that story because they couldn't figure out a way to not make Triple H out to be a chump at that point. So but the right ending would have been for Kurt Angle to get the girl and even potentially become world champion and have Stephanie. So it's kind of like I didn't want to replicate that. I didn't want this story to be like, right now we give you a kind of really poor or botched finish to the story in order to keep James Storm in the company. Actually, the right way for this story to end, if I do it properly, is for James Storm to go. And so that's why there's going to be no reprieve for James Storm. He is going from the company here. So next up, we got tag team titles on the line. It's going to be Ace Steel and Barry Buchanan against the team of CM Punk and Buddy Wayne. Now, of course, Buddy Wayne and CM Punk won the match at the last. Before we go any further, they won a match at the last show, beating Ace Steel and Billy Kidman. These two both in a feud with those two. Punk and Buddy Wayne, though, obviously have an uneasy alliance because of the fact that they were in a feud for a long periods last year. And in this one, they are going to lose when Barry Buchanan is going to pin Buddy Wayne. We'll make this the storytelling match and an open match, and with a tainted pinfall finish. But that's how it's going to go. The Rebellion, Ace Steel and Barry Buchanan defending their Northwest Tag Team titles for the first time, of course, since winning them from James Storm and Chris Harris back in January. And in this situation, the Rebellion are going to hold on to their titles, and that could be a good match. So we'll see how that does. So the next match is also a place where we're going to see somebody leaving. It's going to be Rex King against Bobby Walker. The Bobby Walker experiment has officially failed. This isn't even going to be a particularly long match. Rex King's going to win. We'll make it an open match, but a pinfall finish. No shenanigans here. Bobby Walker just isn't good enough, basically. I mean, he can't be in a match of any length whatsoever. His performances in the ring have not been good enough. And after I think this is his seventh match, this will be in the company, he will be done. And we will be looking back out to the market to see if we can find somebody to replace him. But yeah, Rex King, this is a loser leaves. I forgot to say, this is a loser leaves random wrestling review match that came about after King challenged him to the match 2 weeks ago, and this one's going to be won by Rex King. And Bobby Walker will never be seen again in the Random Wrestling Review because, as I say, he just hasn't performed to the level we were hoping for. And so our main event is Chris Harris and Jim the Anvil Neidhart against James Storm and Dave Batista. Chris Harris is carrying an injury. I forgot about that, but he is. So that's a bit of an annoyance. And I think what we'll do is we'll have Dave Batista pin Chris Harris, taking advantage of that injury, and that's going to be our main event. Just have a look at the booking analysis. Chris Harris, okay, yes, he's injured. We're not using all those other guys. And then after the main event, we are going to have a thing where James Storm basically, we'll have him make a speech. James Storm says goodbye to the RWR faithful, and this really is the end. This is the end. I'm not. And I recognize. Well, I feel like it's a big deal. Is faithful spelled with two L's or not? Goodness me. Let's just call it fans. I don't even know. I can't be bothered to figure it out. 6 minute here. Batista's just going to leave him in the ring on his own. It's not like James Storm and Dave Batista are particularly good friends. In fact, they're not friends at all. So this is just really for James Storm to say goodbye to the fans. And I guess the other way I equated this, and I realize I'm really dwelling on the fact that James Storm's leaving here, but I do think it's kind of out of the ordinary for a wrestling company to do something like this, and probably a mistake on my part because James Storm will undoubtedly have been a very, very useful piece to have in the company because he's so good going forward. But ultimately, the other reason was I thought of it like often get in like television series where a character sort of finally does something, either like they find their voice or they become brave for the first time, or they step up at some point, or they find in themselves something that they hadn't realized before, and then the show kills them off in a really kind of tragic way. I feel like that's kind of what we're doing here. James Storm has just gotten over as this huge babyface with the fans. They really like him. They really hate Bruce Hart and his clan. And now he's going. Like, this is it. This is the end for James Storm, and we've kind of killed him off in our story. So again, like, a little bit of a funny thing in my head going through, and maybe, as I said, I don't think normally a wrestling company would do this. You can't really afford to when you got a guy who's over and a baby face and a really good wrestler. You can't really afford to let them go. But we have the, I guess, the luxury of this not being real, and so I can just be like, okay, that's the right way for this story to end. Let's end it that way. So here we go. Then we're going to go into Mega Slam for this particular event, and 182 people in the Marshall Center. I think that's a bit of a drop off from previous shows. But anyway, Teddy Hart and TJ Wilson defeat Mark Henry and Sean Stasiak in 12 minutes and 10 seconds. When Teddy Hart pins Sean Stasiak with a fast roll up after Mark Henry wiped out Sean Stasiak by accident, like it. That's exactly the kind of finish I was looking for. TJ Wilson is the weak link with just a 22 here, but Teddy Hart now a 40, so he's really getting good. Teddy Hart really starting to improve. A segment rating of 37. Stasiak was a 45. Henry a 35. A good start to the show, although Stasiak was off his game. But yeah, really impressed with Teddy Hart here. He's starting to really improve as a performer. Then we have Billy Kidman versus C.W. Anderson, and this was just a not on a major match here. Kidman winning with a shooting star press after 9:42, getting a win back against a wrestler, of course, that he lost to about a month ago. In their third segment of the night, a woman comes out to the ring, of course, James Storm's manager, and she appeals to Bruce Hart to give James Storm a new contract. But Bruce Hart rejects the suggestion, says that James Storm has made his bed and he must now lie in it. He will no longer be with the Random Wrestling Review. Tonight is his last night in the company. And he says that he wouldn't have even booked him had it not been for Chris Harris and Jim Neidhart desperate to get their hands on Storm after what took place 2 weeks ago. So a segment rating here of 39 as woman tries to get James Storm a renewed contract with Bruce Hart, rejects the notion. Then a 48 rated tag team match here as Ace Steel and Barry Buchanan defeated CM Punk and Buddy Wayne in 15:25 when Barry Buchanan pins Buddy Wayne illegally using the ropes for leverage. Ace Steel and Barry Buchanan make defense number 1 of the Northwest tag team titles. Realistically, I should have had Billy Kidman come in and interfere on Ace Steel and Barry Buchanan's behalf, but I think it just slipped out of my head, to be honest, and I don't think it made a huge amount of difference. Steel and Buchanan make the first defense of their tag belts, and you can see here, Punk was a 45, Steel a 45, Buchanan a 42, Buddy Wayne a 39, so Wayne was the weakest in the ring here. Buddy Wayne's still decent, though, and still really valuable for me in terms of the Random Wrestling Review. So then we had Rex King versus Bobby Walker in the Loser Leaves Random Wrestling Review match, and King wins this in 8:34 by pinfall. He has an in-ring performance of 37. Bobby Walker was off his game and visibly tiring towards the end. Yet again, reasons why Bobby Walker is simply not going to couldn't stick around. We had to be done with him. Perhaps not exactly the best way or the most creative way to finish this story off, but I just thought, let's just have a nice clean ending for Bobby Walker, and he's done. So then we go to the main event. It's a tag team match, and it is a very good tag team match. A segment rating of 55 here as James Storm and Dave Batista defeat Chris Harris and Jim Neidhart in 11:34 when Batista pinned Harris. The two main storylines in the company advanced. The injury that Chris Harris worked through took a big toll, but didn't really seem to make that much of a difference as Chris Harris did a 43 anyway. Jim Neidhart was a 54. James Storm a 49. Batista 45. Still got the issue where James Storm and women are on different sides of the face-heel divide, which is confusing only from a game and mechanics standpoint, really. Segment rating of 55, though, I cannot argue with that. A very good tag team match to finish the show. And then James Storm says goodbye to the Random Wrestling Review fans in a 70 rated segment. And I am just like, what am I doing here? What am I doing allowing James Storm to leave this company? Look at that segment rating. It is I don't think we've ever done anything in the region of 70 on this show, but I'm going to put it down to the fact that the fans are just so emotional. They're seeing this guy that they're finally willing to embrace. James Storm has been with the company, I don't know, at least 3.5 years, possibly as much as 4 years. And they've finally been willing to embrace him as a babyface, and he is gone. Bruce Hart has fired him on the back of the fact that Chris Harris turned on him, and James Storm no longer had the tag team titles, and therefore there was no reason for Bruce Hart to have to keep him around. And so James Storm, a second reign of 70s, he says goodbye to the fans. He says thanks very much for everything over the time he's been with the company, and he hopes to see everybody down the line. And that is the end of this fantastic show. Overall rating of 54. Billy Kidman versus CW Anderson was great. The tag team title match was really good. The tag team main event was excellent. And the final segment was absolutely stunning. Seeing as James Storm's going, I don't feel the need to really give him any praise because, I mean, what would be the point? I think we'll point out Chris Harris is a good example for wrestling through injury. I think we will go with Ace Steel, compliment on a good performance. He was very good in that match. And how about we go with Rex King as well, compliment for getting us through the Bobby Walker stuff. And so that is Mega Slam in the books, and that is also James Storm finished up with the company. Uh, a yeah, something that I just had not. I'm kind of still kind of in reeling from it because that final segment was so good. I'm almost like, do I just change my mind? I'm not going to. That's the way the story should finish, and I think obviously ultimately, if you consider that way that did finish with that segment at the end, the perfect way to finish, I suppose. Ace Steel and Barry Buchanan, obviously tag team champions. The first defense for them of these title belts against Punk and Buddy Wayne. A 48 rated match, one of the best tag team defenses ever. In terms of top 100s, Mega Slam is the best show we've ever done, and by 4 clear ratings points of 54. That is something very, very special. I mean, obviously, really boosted by that final segment. And the match itself was the third best in company history, a 55 rated match. James Storm Batista versus Chris Harris and Jim Neidhart. Since we brought in Jim Neidhart, I mean, look, he's really expensive and he's also a bit annoyed. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of our top 5 matches have Jim the Anvil Neidhart in them, and there's another one in the top 10 as well. He has been incredibly valuable in terms of in-ring quality. So it's pretty hard to argue with that. I'm going to give him another. I'm going to give him another holiday because I think we just need to keep giving him, a week off here and there. And we haven't got another show for a little while. And I just want to kind of mollify him. He's still angry. Probably will continue to be angry for some time. Where was that in terms of attendance? It wasn't the best, was it? So it was down here. We've had 187, 188, and 189. So it was the 7th best attended show. Maybe because we've been repeating a lot of stuff with James Storm, Chris Harris, Jim Neidhart, Dave Batista over the last few months. It makes sense that I wouldn't quite hit the same levels. But that was their chance to say goodbye to James Storm. Maybe just like everybody else, they expected a kind of last minute change, as some kind of story quirk that would have allowed him to stick around. But it just wasn't the right way to go. We're going to go to the end of the current month here as we have the last few minutes of this episode, and we may just have a chance to have a look at the finances because I am really eager for us to keep a check on that at the moment, because if we can keep making a profit, we might be in a very good place. If you've enjoyed today's episode, make sure you give us a like for this one and give me your thoughts on our decision to allow James Storm to go. Is it brave or is it stupid? Tell us what you think. I feel like it's the right decision for the story, maybe not for the company, but who knows. I am all about the story with this series, and I feel like James Storm leaving, not having a way back in after Bruce Hart has effectively released him, is the right way to go. And maybe there's going to be a way that we can reintroduce him. There was obviously some ideas that I was weighing up over the past few months when this story's been going on about how this would end, and trying to figure out a way that James Storm might become redeemed, maybe in Bruce Hart's eyes. I couldn't come to an idea within those months, but maybe in the future that will come. Let's have a look at Super Bowl 11 then. And in the main event, Chicky Star defeated Randy Savage to retain the World Heavyweight title. So you can see WCW doing everything they can to get Chicky Star over. I mean, he beat Ric Flair last month, I think, and Randy Savage this month, but it just isn't enough, and his matches are not good enough. I mean, look at the guy. This can't be the WWE World Champion, but it is. Popularity is really good. He's just clearly not that great in the ring, unfortunately for WCW. Um, he is a two-time World Heavyweight Champion as well. I was looking match history is what I was going to look at. So you can see here, yeah, Chicky Star defeated Randy Savage, Arn Anderson, and Hugh Morris in a four-way match. He'd been feuding with Randy Savage and Ric Flair, defeated Ric Flair at Clash of the Champions, defeated Bam Bam Bigelow at the Super Show with New Japan. And here he's beating Randy Savage, but those performances aren't getting much better. The show rating was 72. Ric Flair defeated Arn Anderson by DQ, so maybe Flair should still be at the top. Maybe Arn Anderson should be at the top. I don't know, but Chicky Star is what they've chosen to go with. Now, there's a big Mr. Perfect title victory. The UWA World Heavyweight title changed hands. Mr. Perfect defeated Octagon. So Kurt Hennig is now champion in UWA in a 79 rated match. I mean, this was a better show than the WCW show that we just looked at. Well, that is all we've got time for today. We have a news here. Hired by on a handshake deal. That's fine. Okay. Fine. So Johnny Grunge has been hired by Ring of Honor, but on a handshake deal, so that's not going to affect us. That's all we got time for today. In fact, we've gone over a little bit over the time limit. Thank you for watching. Obviously, next time we've got the Golden Triangle Tournament. We're trying to fit that all into one episode. But until then, thank you very much for joining me today.